Hey everybody, welcome back to your Donna Drones podcast. I'm Dawn Zolda, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. I'm coming to you live actually. I know USI has a rep here too from the FAA Drone Symposium today, and this afternoon the AAM Summit kicks off. So I'm in Baltimore, Maryland right now in a hotel room, but I'm so excited to be talking to Josh Olds, who's the president of USI, the sponsor of this month, which we're dedicating to building program success. I mean, that's what this event is here in Baltimore, right? What the regulations are going to be that are going to build program success. But Josh and USI have an incredible program that we're going to talk about today to help businesses, academia, individuals, schools, teachers, all kinds of people build drone program success. So Josh, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Josh has been on the show before. In fact, he was on last year, and he's a very close partner of mine, educational partner with our Law Tech Connect workshop, and collaborated with Josh on a drone law textbook. So if you guys haven't bought that, check it out. It's awesome. But let's talk, Josh, let's catch people up because so much has changed really since you and I last spoke on this podcast with USI. And I want to get deep into that. But before we do, for those that don't know you, can you give them a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, so I've been at USI now for almost 9 years. That date just came and passed, so it's been a really great time. I actually come from operations, so I flew. I'm a pilot by background, and then I'm an A&P mechanic. So I started my career in the remotely piloted world with Textron, and from there went to oil and gas, flew remotely piloted helicopters for anti-piracy. So I really cut my teeth on the operational complexities of complex or advanced operations. That's really the foundations of where USI came from in the 2014-15 era. And so yeah, a little bit about the background. I've been a president CEO of USI since 2018, but one of the original co-founders.
Well, awesome. And you've got background in academia too, having worked at Embry-Riddle. And by the way, Josh gets a little bit deeper into his background on Clubhouse. He was with Maggie last week. So if you guys missed that, go back and listen to that on demand. Really great interview. But let's talk about USI. First of all, you rebranded. It used to be a very long name, Unmanned Safety Institute. Now it's almost like TI in Vegas, right? Treasure Island became TI. You guys became USI. Tell us at a super high level, like that 30,000 foot view, what USI is all about.
USI is about empowering, enabling corporations, academia with workforce organizational standards. We're about raising the bar so that the industry can find that return on investment through scalable, standardized operation, everything from the personnel level, the organizational, and the technology. But at the varying risk levels, deploying technology in an efficient, effective way that really impacts the organization at the bottom line or from a safety risk management perspective.
Yeah, I know safety is really, I mean, if I was going to distill down your main core principle, it's all around safety. I know that it kind of emanates from your background, having worked with, military contractor in the Indian Ocean and all the operations you did, crew risk management and things of this nature. Tell us a little bit about your team, this team that helps you build out the safety ecosystem that you've created over these years.
Yeah, we have a phenomenal team. It's part of the reason of the success of USI. I mean, it's an interesting group, and we always talk about this industry is built of a lot of different cultures from an industrial perspective, everything from the DoD to the aviation world to the tech world to the hobbyist recreationalist. And so there's a lot of varying backgrounds. And so as a team, we've got folks from the aviation world, the biz av world, the tech world, degrees, non-degrees. It's a very diverse group of people that have come together. And again, that's on the development side, that's on the coursework delivery, the customer support side of the business. The key is everybody has that servant leadership kind of mentality of this is aviation. We're driving aviation forward into the new era of technology inside of the industry, and we want to do it the right way from the start, to allow for long-term scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having been here just like all day yesterday, taking copious notes, over the drone symposium, that's definitely a theme that's jumping out, Josh. This idea of inflection point, this idea of complex operations on the cusp of beyond visual line of sight, right? With advanced air mobility, and I'll use that kind of common term, flying taxis, very close nearby on the horizon. I know that's why you're evolving at USI to address these issues. So let's talk about this idea of building program success for businesses, and the return on investment people get by having robust safety programs, training programs, the certifications you offer. So much to unpack. So let's start first with organizational requirements, because as we all know, not every organization is the same. I mean, a business is very different than academia, and you and I have been in both worlds. So let's start with businesses. And can you explain to people what services that USI offers to help grow and implement business drone programs?
Yeah, so early on in the company's origin, we really defined ground and airborne based risk, the risk profiles that an organization takes on, because that really defines from a safety versus production perspective. And what I mean by that is what you invest in the safety of your organization, and that's creating the shared safety culture has to make sense from the production, the ROI of that technology. So we broke it out into what we call primary operations, which is probably 70 to 80% of the industry today. And then advanced operations is that BV loss or flight over people. It's the advanced risk, whether it's ground or airborne based advanced risk. And so when you look at the products and services that USI is deploying organizationally, it's really premised upon that. Where is the operation? What kind of technology is being flown? And what kind of skill sets, what kind of documentation, emergency response plans, safety management systems, what are all the pieces that need to be in place for that organization to scale, identify that ROI, but be safe, and share that safety mindset as they grow.
So if I were to kind of break this down, I'd say maybe three main things that you're doing. One is this organizational support that you mentioned, helping folks write safety management programs, getting their documentation in order. A second one being remote pilot education, training, certification. We're going to really dig into that in a second. And then also you guys have software support in addition to that organizational support. So tell us a little bit about the software.
Yeah, so on that remote pilot training, we fall under the personnel bucket. That could be the technician, visual observer, electronic observer. That's your personnel training. On the tech side, and you mentioned the software, it's everything from the technology standard of what that fleet maintenance looks like. What are your maintenance practices, and then on the software side, we leverage several software tools that make up the Vista product, but it's everything that addresses the learning objectives. So the professional development, we do that through learning management systems. It's managing the credentialing, so managing Part 107, managing the safety credentials. So we call it we do digital badging, tied to the third-party proctored assessment, and then we use third-party fleet management and pilot proficiency and currency tools. And so this helps manage both the currency of the pilots, but also the fleet, in the management of that fleet. Again, at a primary stage or that aircraft under 20 pounds, low risk, low complexity. That operation looks very different than if it's a BV loss training. And we've been doing BV loss training for about 3 years now under waiver.
Oh, wow.
That becomes more complex when you start talking about Group 2, Group 3 aircraft, because the fleet management side of that and the pilot proficiency and tracking. You have technicians that are managing equipment. You have pilot proficiency and currency to maintain that currency on flying that technology. You're now implementing a lot more standards-based operations, which creates a more complex operation. So to that end, the software helps manage that whole ecosystem and the complexity of having, whether it's 10 pilots or 200 pilots, managing those components for all of those aircraft and all of those pilots or technicians or visual observers that are part of that operation.
So it holistically kind of grabs all the information about the people, the organization, and the technology in one place.
And it validates it. It's all based on aircraft telemetry, which is a really important component of that. The telemetry is that validation tool that says, look, whether you're flying DJI or you're flying Parrot or you're flying Census technology, it doesn't matter what the aircraft is. You want that telemetry ingested into the system, because that now becomes part of how you standardize the proficiency and currency per aircraft. Every aircraft's different. The complexities of that operation are challenging, but having single sign-on into every one of those tools in one ecosystem is an incredibly important part of that Vista tool.
Wow, you've really taken this to a whole new level. Because I mean, this sounds like, having been in the Air Force, the kind of intense, training and background that the pilots need, the crewed aircraft. And I know you kind of bring that mindset into what you're developing there at USI.
Well, our obsession is ROI. It's the long-term scalability and repeatability of operations. And I keep saying that term because, again, it's one thing to be able to do an operation once, and that's great. But for corporations that are looking at deploying this technology, it's important that it's like a computer. It's now become a part of your operation to create efficiencies, to save money, make money, or reduce hazard hours, increase the safety internal to the company. It's now a tool or an expanding skill that's internal to these corporations. And if we're not focused on a 2-year sustainability ROI model or a 3-year, then it doesn't make sense for a corporation to deploy the technology. It's the difference between dabbling or running a flight department. And again, a lot of folks don't really consider, I think, drone operations internal to a corporation, a flight department, but they're registered aircraft. They're operating as aviation assets within the corporation. And so what we're trying to do is just give the foundation. So as the company deploys that technology and finds new use cases and new reasons to deploy bigger, more complex, advanced technology, they have all of the infrastructure and foundation in place in order to scale into that next phase of technological innovation inside of the company.
Well, Josh, it's funny you say that, because you come from oil and gas as well. And we just had Craig Hustleby from Synergy Aviation, who also has an ONG background, and, jumped into kind of the aviation piece of the oil and gas industry. And, obviously crewed aircraft, using fixed wing for pipeline inspections, and they've added drones. And so I think the folks that kind of come from that background, and that's their comfort zone, it's easy for them to think of drones as part of their flight program, just as Craig and Synergy does. And but you offer the whole gambit. So the types of training that you offer. And by the way, everybody, just to be clear, the training you guys offer, Josh, there's an online component, but there's also in person, right? So everybody go to USI's website if you haven't checked it out lately. It's chock full of information, but it's not just all online. So tell us a little bit about the modalities that you offer, the various training classes.
Yeah, so I mentioned at the beginning that our whole vision is about empowering and enabling workforce
Right.
development and training. So we have a learning management system where the content and again, to your point, there's online content. We consider that self-paced, online content. You sit for certification through third-party testing. It's a PSI company, so it's done remotely. It can also be done in person, but that modality is for purely online education tied to the knowledge components. But we also have hybrid programs where it's a live asynchronous or synchronous models with instructors. There's also a completely in-person model. USI's developed a training standard that's third-party proctored towards, and again, we're we're aligned with the safety certification. So safety certifications are about a standardized skill set and knowledge set where we have affiliate programs, colleges, community colleges, technical colleges, high schools across the country. The point is whether you're a corporation or you're an educational institution, they're all training and standardizing to the same certification. That 12th grader in high school is taking the exact same certification exam that lineman at the electric utility company is taking. And that was the whole point when we established USI, was that there was equivalency within the commercial workforce. So the identical skill set or testing that the individual inside of the workforce was taking was identical to the knowledge assessment that the individual within career technical education or at that local community college was taking, because it created employment pathways that were natural. The internal training was already aligning to the certification, and the educational system was completing the same exact program. We license programs, whether it's to a corporate company that wants to do their own internal training, and so they want to certify their instructors to do the training, or it's an academic institution. It's a train the trainer model. Now, we do a lot of training still as USI in both stage 1 and stage 2, and that's primarily for folks that want to come and get a training directly from USI. But we have the partners that can also do this regionally, and that was the whole goal of the program, was to make a scalable workforce development program where we partnered with workforce programs across the country. The certification.
You mentioned, Josh.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but before we kind of proceed, I want to kind of back up a little bit, because you mentioned stage 1, stage 2, and I think we may have some slides to kind of walk through that a little bit for those that aren't familiar with this. So tell us a little bit about this kind of stage 1 drone training certification, what we're talking about here.
So if we can go to the core certification slide, that probably does the best job of explaining.
Sure, we'll pop that one back up.
That stage 1 is the primary certifications. And so when I mention primary certifications, this is the risk profile I mentioned. So it's Group 1 aircraft under 20 pounds, visual line of sight operations, low risk, low complexity, or highly automated operations. These kind of operations, again, from an academic perspective, we've deployed these in secondary schools across the country. And this is really that knowledge and then skill set. So VSO Flight is all about flight training. This is the train the trainer model as well. So there's the UCI educator, it's USI certified educator. And what that is a ground instructor. And so that has very specific requirements to being a ground instructor for knowledge-based assessment. At the UCI, the USI certified instructor level, which is down there on the bottom, that is a flight instructor training. So they're going to go through an FOI. They're going to go through standardized proficiency and currency for the instructor. So if you're out there flight instructing with students, you understand it and you're training from a safety perspective. This allows, if an instructor just wants to teach ground components, they teach ground components. And if they want to do flight instruction, there's a requirement for that. So on the next page of this exact document, there's a digital badge structure. And in that, we have the standard safety structure. And that's your, light blue is your primary badges, your dark blue is your what we call the advanced certifications, or also referenced as stage 2. There's 4 levels of certification, and this is going to cover everything at stage 2 tied to BVLOS operations. So this is practical implementation of safety management systems, crew resource management, aeronautical decision making. We're going to cover human machine interface. We talk about automation, trend analysis, and really the future of where this technology is going. And what this is teaching is, inside of the world today, we're dealing with a lot of fatigue. If you sit in front of a computer for 4 hours and you're monitoring systems, it's just a lot of scanning, and that creates fatigue from an operational or a pilot perspective. So that's what the first section covers from a safety perspective, foundations. This is for the pilot, this is for the technician, the visual observer. When you move into the next section, it's about application-based certification. So now we go from what we call initial qualification training or safety standards to what are we actually doing with the technology. It's the other side of the coin. So safety is on one side, and then how you apply that technology is on the other. So now we go into application specific. We're going to use this for flying in the wire environment. So we're going to talk about shot sheets around a utility pole, or maybe it's an infrastructure, and so it's a tower type of setting. in the world of operations, as automated as this technology becomes, there's still emergency and abnormal response. And that's really, from a training perspective, what we focus on. It's not just about how to use the user interface or fly the aircraft. Obviously, that's part of the training environment. But when we talk about flight training, it's the process, it's the procedure, where every time that operation is done, a site assessment is done, a risk assessment, once you're on site, is completed. You're following checklist procedure, you're following organizational documentation. It's about doing the same process every time you go out in the field. Now, this may take 10 minutes, right? It may not be that complex for the particular operation, but you're following a process. And what that does is it's pre-risk assessment and then post-risk assessment of how operations are going to be conducted inside of this world. And so that's the application specific. Then we have designations. The designations are going back to, you complete safety level 1 as an example, and the educator badge, you can teach that content. If you complete VSO ground, you can complete that content. So the designations are basically what you do on behalf of an organization because you've completed the certification framework required of that designation. Lastly, custom training programs. This is for the training. This can be a specific application of technology. This can be an OJT within an organization where they have specific way for a pilot to do something and they want to assess them from a digital credentialing perspective. This allows organizations to create their own credentials, leveraging the learning management system and our third-party testing provider, where they can actually offer their own third-party credentialing as part of operating on behalf of a specific organization. So these become those custom frameworks.
Well, I love all of it, but the custom aspect of it, I think, is really critical because, like I said before, and you agree, not every organization is the same, and there might be specific ways that they, like Drone Up, for example, might have a very specific process for how they're delivering for Walmart, and for them to be able to customize training, or a similar company do something like this. This is how we do it, I think, is really key. And you talk about ROI, Josh. I imagine investing in your people, investing in your organization and your technology. I mean, that's how businesses succeed.
It is. And again, we're obsessed with ROI. So from a program perspective, we do not require curriculum, and that's kind of this fallacy in the marketplace. Well, I have to go sit for, $1,000 curriculum to go sit for certification. And it's just not the case. We have preparatory curriculum that will prepare for examination. It gets you the learning objectives you need to go test. But the reality is you could go to the testing company today or the website and register for a certification exam. And those exams are $99 to go sit for a proctored certification assessment. So they're two very different worlds. There's curriculum that prepares you if you want to go through a self-paced program to learn things that you may or may not know. And then there's testing. Certification testing was a completely separate component to the business, which is if you already know the knowledge, and we get this a lot from the industry, is look, I already know this. I've been doing it for 3 years, 5 years. And the point is the certification exams are there. So you can go assess your body of knowledge that you already have by sitting for certification. You do not have to sit through coursework. And so that's how the world of third-party certification works and how those safety credential structures work.
Okay, awesome. By the way, Josh, you do have some fans out there. We've got lots of viewers on LinkedIn and AVSI today. So thanks, everybody. We are live if you've got comments or questions. And we did have a comment here on LinkedIn. And Sarah, sorry, LinkedIn user. I guess we don't know who this person is, but they say, have you heard about the USA drone port in Hazard, Kentucky? And I'm going to say no. It sounds kind of cool, though, so I'd love to learn more. And they also say pretty good organization to connect with, USI. So thank you so much. Appreciate that. Nice, kind comment. Keep them coming. Let us know you're out there, who you are. Again, if you have questions for Josh, now is the time to ask because he is here to talk about what it is they're doing. So, you mentioned, there's this, obviously this business side where you can go in and customize programs, but you used an acronym that not everybody may understand if they're not from academia, because that's another big kind of part of what you focus on, the CTE. Can you tell people what that is, Josh? Because you have really spearheaded some great things from a workforce development standpoint for colleges, community colleges, high school students and teachers. What is CTE and why is it so important to the future of the industry?
No, it's a great question. So, career technical education, it's a huge focus of ours because I go back to the 90s, computer technology, I compare it to drone technology. In the 90s, every career cluster had a use case for computer technology. I mean, look, you go in industry today and everybody has a computer, right? That laptop or personal laptop became part of business. Why? Because it created efficiencies inside of doing your job. Drone technology is doing the very same thing within every career cluster that exists inside of the industry. I mean, you go into the medical field and there's medical, sample, deliveries between the clinic and where the sample's taken. You've got all sorts of use cases inside of every industry cluster. And so when we talk about career tech ed, this is often why when we go into a state system, at the Department of Education, we start with career technical education because in the career tech ed world, there is a need for the UAS as part of the tool. It's a tool in your tool belt. You're using it as part of your job. This means you could be a lineman and you're using the drone to not have to climb the pole, to do the inspection from the
Right.
ground. You could be public safety, right? And you're using that aircraft as part of your everyday job of something that, would have normally required a helicopter support. There's all sorts
Yes.
of use cases, and those are unfolding. We all know that. We see that. But what's not happening is the workforce development that's required of the future talent that are going to be in those career fields. So if you look at career tech ed, there's 16. Correct me if I'm wrong, for folks out there, but there are 16 career fields, industry clusters that are represented nationally. And again, you can break those down into much smaller buckets. But the point being that career tech ed has a need for workforce development where it's embedded program. It's embedded into the public safety CTE track. And within a state, you have a track, and it could be public safety. It could be electrical linemen or utility. It could be agriculture. Inside of each of these silos, there's a need for an embedded technology implementation where they're coming out with that feather in their cap where, look, I can fly a drone commercially. And I also know and understand the safety aspects of flying them. That is one reason we see CT as being so important. It's educating our future workforce that sits in secondary education today on what it means to be a professional aviator, even with a Group 1 technology. And then we go into, okay, what does that's an embedded program. There's also a standalone program, and you have aviation standalone programs today where they focus on aviation training. The reality is states are now deploying full UAS CT programs where you spend 4 years in high school going through drone CT programs because your whole goal is to go into the workforce where you're flying. Your job isn't a lineman, or maybe you're not a public safety officer, but your job is to operate aircraft as your career. And so now you're going to be a full-time pilot. You're flying BVLOS aircraft. But our obsession is ensuring that the skill sets you're obtaining at that level of secondary education, or maybe that technical college level, or even the four-year university, aligns with your salary expectation. And that's really important, both from an industry perspective, but to gain job skill sets where you can gain employment upon certification and then go complete your degree where you now have a job and you're not taking on massive amounts of debt to go get a degree, but you actually have a workforce skill set. It's all about pathways. And that's where, our stage 1 pathway and then our stage 2 pathway comes into play, because it's aligning the salary expectation to the skill sets and the knowledge components you need to enter that space at that varying level.
I love all of that. And how many states are you in now, Josh? Because you've really made significant inroads across the entire United States through CTE and all of your programs.
So currently we're in all 50 states with educational training
Wow,
program.
that's new, Josh. Because the last time we talked, I feel like you were in the 30s roughly, and
It,
now
it,
you're in every state. That's amazing.
what's amazing is the industry's and we're all feeling it, right? The industry's blowing up. I mean, there's all sorts of excitement, and a lot of it has to do with the FAA reauthorization. We're all excited for what 108 is going to come out, and I'm curious, what's happening this week up at the
I
symposium.
will.
Yeah.
Wait, ready, Josh? Drum roll, big reveal. Just yesterday, the FAA said from the stage, I think it was during the keynote, said NPRM, notice of public rulemaking, by next August. I
All right.
thought it was going to be February.
So did I. So did I. I mean,
Sorry,
okay.
sorry
Extend the
but
timeline a
you know,
little.
I was just
But you
like,
know what?
wait a
Lines
minute.
in the
I
sand
thought
are a good thing. I mean, look, a date on the calendar, that's a good thing.
it's still good, right? I hear
From
you.
an industry, at least we have a target on that roadmap, and it's
There you
out there,
go.
it's public. So, look, I go back to operating BV loss again. I was operating BV loss in 2010, 2011. The technology exists. The technology is out there. The ability to do it safely is there. There's skill sets, and so as we're looking at the industry as a whole and the ability to deploy safety standards across Part 108, Part 107, Part 137, Part 103, you name the section of the FARs. The way we do that is bringing in aviation safety standards and educating anybody operating, flying, managing, monitoring, you name the job role. But if you're the pilot in command of a piece of technology, an aviation asset in the national airspace, that you have an understanding of the national airspace in which you're operating, not just what class of airspace you're in, but the right of way rules, the technology you're operating, the emergency things to look for, lost communication, what to do in case of emergencies will save incidents and accidents that will set the industry back 5 to 10 years if they were to occur. We're just obsessed with raising the bar and the standard of operating inside of that national airspace so that we enjoy a much quicker recognition of the benefit of this technology inside of the national airspace, within the next 5 years.
Well, Josh, I think you would agree that we've seen just such a great increase in professionalism within the industry over the last couple years, and I agree with you. And frankly, I think USI has played a big role in that. So thank you for everything you're doing for the industry. Um, I wanted to stick with this topic of CTE. You use the word pathways, and I think that's a really important word, and you're actually helping people connect, right? Not only get the level of knowledge they need to be successful, to have that ROI, as you said, to have the right salary, right, for this industry, but you're also connecting them with businesses that are in search of pilots. Can you tell us a little bit about that program that you have?
Yeah, so we're labeling that the USI pipeline program, but the whole model behind that I mentioned is this ecosystem between the commercial marketplace and academia, where we're able to plug in pilots at the level of operation that folks within the corporate world need them. So if you're looking for a stage 2 pilot that can fly BV loss, we have them, and students can opt into that program. They provide their CVs, and we connect the dots between companies looking for that talent. Like we announced, I don't know, it's probably been 4 or 5 weeks ago, we announced the pipeline program with Zipline, where a student completes stage 1 or primary certifications, and then stage 2 or advanced certifications, and they receive an interview with Zipline. And again, the goal there is it's a certification based path. So if you're coming out of the technical college realm and you are in certification, or you're coming out of the military and you're transitioning, we also have a skill bridge program where you can complete that. It's a 16-week program. You get through stage 2, and that gives you that pathway opportunity. So, I mentioned pathways because we have all sorts of learners inside of this industry. We're not just talking about, secondary learners out of high school. We're talking about adult learners, reskilling or upskilling, changing career fields. We're talking about exiting military, where they're now entering the commercial marketplace, and maybe they flew UAS inside of them. Exactly. Yeah, we love them. But transitioning into the corporate world can be a very difficult task. You're trying to figure out, okay, if you're coming from aviation, or maybe you're a technician, maybe you just work with technology, but now want to play a role inside of the UAS world. What does that transition look like? How do you make that jump? And that's what these credentials are meant to do, is gives a commercial standard where they very likely already have a lot of this background in flying DoD aircraft. I mean, the aviation safety components, they're not new. It's just being folded into RPAS operations. And so it provides that commercial equivalency moving into the corporate world to conduct those operations with companies. But those companies looking for the talent can pull them directly out of the training programs, because they've completed all of the certifications, and they're all third-party validated, meaning whether we do the training, whether our academic partners do the training, they're all completing the same knowledge assessment with a third-party proctor.
Well, you know what, Josh? I'm just going to right here now give you a new call sign, Maestro, because I don't know how you've done this, but if people are out there, I don't I would assume most people don't fully appreciate how difficult it is, even just within, just let's say, academia, to try to do something that's kind of outside the box, that's groundbreaking, that certainly is cross-disciplinary. You know, that example you gave of CTE within that column, like just to say I'm training to be, my CTE column is public safety. And now there's a drone component to it that you've been able to somehow inject. Like, that is significant and that is hard, because so many people just, they don't want to change the way they've always done things. And for you to have been able to do that across 50 states, and then everything else you did. And one other thing I want to talk about is, and then connect with companies. I mean, it's really just mind blowing, honestly. But once people are in companies, or even just have their own company, you've also helped them on the insurance side of the house. And I remember when I first met you and we were brainstorming and talking, and I'm like, do you have a thing where if people get your certifications or something, they get some money off, or some kind of point system with an insurance company? And at the time you didn't, and now you do. So tell us a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, so we have a partnership with USAIG. So it's an aviation insurance underwriter. USI serves as their safety and loss control partner. What it allows corporations to do that have an aviation underwriting, and anybody with a large amount of aircraft or a large amount of pilots will have aviation underwriting, because it's a very different policy than your typical insurance policy. So they can actually spend what are called safety points. So when they pay their premium, they get safety points, and those safety points can be spent on safety services at USI, which means they can spend those on certification programs. They can spend them on Vista products and services. To the point at the beginning is every company is different. The needs of every company are different in terms of their particular safety, case. And so they can come and they spend those on all sorts of products and services within USI, but that's tied to their underwriting policy, and premium with their underwriter. And so that's been a great program. We love that program because it's allowing companies where the insurance company actually foots the bill for safety products. It's about mitigating risk. And again, we've been in 107 for a very long time.
Right.
And I think a lot of the industry didn't expect 107 to be what it was when it came out in 2016. And so that's why there's so much excitement around 108, because the reality is that's where the value of the technology really takes off. It's exponential, but it also presents more expensive equipment, more expensive payloads and sensors and data, captured devices, which now creates more expensive aircraft, which then creates a higher risk profile, not just because of the value of the aircraft, but also because of the kinetic mass that aircraft presents to flying over people or property and other assets. So everything scales from a risk matrix perspective as you move into those bigger platforms. And that's where the underwriting component of this space has become really important. And we address a lot of the issues, the losses that insurance see inside of every level of the certification structure from a safety perspective, so that we can help educate pilots or scaling operations, 100, 200, 300 pilots, where you want to create a shared mental model. And as they move into more expensive payloads and sensors, you're creating that level of standardization. You're all sharing the same mental model or same nomenclature. When we talk about SMS, safety management system, we're all speaking the same language. We're not coming at it from our different, cultural backgrounds, industry wise, of where we came from. It's this is what we mean when we say crew resource management, or we have a role and it's a visual observer. This is what the visual observer does. That can be defined very differently across organizations. And so we're trying to drive standardization to that so we can grow quicker, faster as an industry.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And, talking about the growing industry and the fact that, I'm here, some of your colleagues from USI are here in Baltimore right now. The AAM summit kicks off this afternoon. And I imagine, maybe something on the horizon, or even right now, is training, those future eVTOL pilots. Is that something that you guys are looking at?
Yeah, it's actually a major component to what we call the advanced training program. So that's stage 2. We focus on group 2, group 3 aircraft, but the reality is the skill sets that come from that program for eVTOL, initially a lot of those platforms are going to be single piloted. And so there's an aviation aspect to it, right? But the business model is premised on remotely piloted aircraft systems. So whether that human is over the loop from an operational perspective or in the loop, the reality is the pilot in command of the aircraft needs to understand emergency abnormal response, trend analysis, fatigue management, everything that's covered in the current advanced training program is going to exist for that same pilot that may monitor 1, 2, 5 different aircraft at the same time. You want them understanding task management, task saturation, automation management, because all of those pieces, all of those topics, the human machine interface or the interaction between the human and the machine, levels of automation, that is all part of that advanced certification pathway. So we've addressed it as part of advanced stage 2. We're also talking about that for what we call stage 3 or complex operations, which would become that eVTOL market of training where those pilot skill sets, operator skill sets, monitor skill sets, whatever you want to call them, they're going to be very, very akin to what is currently advanced operations, where you're monitoring systems, you're monitoring the automation, waypoint navigation, even over the loop, there's a trend analysis component. And so those training programs today exist, but that is the future of the workforce. Again, I'm always saying the workforce of our future, 5 years, 10 years, they exist in secondary education today. And if we're not focused on where that workforce is coming from, we're going to have another workforce shortage, in another 5 years when we want to scale the industry and we've got all of our type certifications for aircraft. And suddenly we're like, okay, well, who's going to operate them? And we're going to have this mismatch of, well, do we hire pilots? Do we hire, A&Ps? Like, who are we hiring to deploy this technology that has the sense of responsibility of that technology with cargo or with humans on board? There's a huge shared fate, component from a human factors perspective of flying or monitoring an aircraft that's separated from you. It's no longer the pilot on board, it's the pilot on the ground, but you may have passengers on board. So it's a very interesting dynamic that we're shifting to as we go into the future.
Well, it doesn't surprise me. You've already thought ahead and you've already built the tools that people need to succeed in that future workforce. So speaking of success, we only have a couple minutes left. I really want to kind of bring this to reality and ask you, Josh, if you could share maybe one of the success stories in any facet of what you're doing that you're very proud of.
So I would have to say it's probably the adoptance of the safety cert structure. Going back to 2015, I can't tell you, the amount of times we would have to explain. I mean, we were constantly explaining this concept of aviation safety inside of the drone world. I mean, when 2016 was around and it came out as what it was like, well, safety, we can go fly a 55-pound aircraft with a Part 107. It's kind of that dynamic.
Right.
What I'm proud of is where the industry is going. And again, what role USI played in that, I'd like to think a big role, but USI has obsessed with aviation safety from the very early stages of the company. I think the greatest success story that we've got is that the safety certification structure and how companies are scaling and standardizing their operations, for me personally, has been one of our greatest success metrics from the company perspective, just because of the adoptance of that as a standard. Even though the FAA says, here's Part 107, you can operate aircraft, companies and risk managers are saying, look, this is a standard we can get behind. This is a standard we can deploy. And so that's really helped grow the academic side, the workforce, where we're getting into students that are in middle school. They're in 6th, 7th grade. They have their whole future ahead of them. They don't have any idea what they want to do, but they really know they like gaming and they really know they like technology. And so kind of enlightening them, again, as they go into the high school setting with certifications, that they have that option now. I mean, I think when I was in high school, I didn't have that option. My whole mental model was I had to go to college, I had to get a degree. I mean, that doesn't exist anymore. There's a pathway where students don't have to go straight to college. And it's not that we discourage that, but there's other pathways where you go get certification, you find that job, you work, you make that money, you then go pay for that college education. But along that path, you're not going into massive debt along that way. And so it's just created a really, I guess, unique, maybe not unique, from an industry perspective, but aviation path for folks that may not have had an opportunity to go into aviation in the first place, where that pathway now exists, and it's in a lot of high schools across the country.
Well, that's awesome. And Josh, is there anything, because we were like, I don't know, actually, I think we're right at time, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Is there anything coming down the pike, anything we should be looking out for from USI that's new? Any announcements? Anything like that?
So we just announced the new search structure, the look and feel, the design of it, but the Vista tool in all of its glory is coming out, which is the whole infrastructure of how to deploy a program at scale and the single sign-in into all the pieces, the educational, the organizational pieces, document management, software, and then technology fleet management, where it's all in one ecosystem. That's going to be launched publicly in the next, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks. Again, we have the infrastructure today, but making it easy to manage large operations, flight departments, whether you think of yourself as a flight department or not, you have a lot of technology and a lot of pilots. Some are located within the Part 91, Part 135 flight department. Some are not. Some are just existing within organizations. Our goal is to help them with the foundational infrastructure, and that's what the whole Vista program is all about. So we're excited for it.
All right. Well, you heard it here first, everybody. I love the big reveals on the Dawn of Drones. So, Josh, where might we find USI in person, you or any of your teammates? Any upcoming events where we can just get to talk to you live?
Yeah, so I'll actually be at CUAV coming up in September. We've got Michelle Dina is at the FAA Symposium and the AM Symposium today. So if you're there, visit with Michelle. We'll be at NBAA, National Business Aviation Association. That is October 16th, I believe. We're at ACTI in Phoenix. That's probably December. Quite a few shows. You'll see somebody from USI at a lot of the shows this summer.
All right. Well, hey, Josh, if you're coming to Vegas and anybody out there coming to commercial UAV, make your plane tickets for Monday, Labor Day, because Monday night, Carasoft and P3 Tech, my company, are partnering on a networking happy hour at Carnival Court. So I got to get it up on my website, but check out my social. If you haven't signed up for my newsletter, I'm putting out a push next Tuesday where you can register. It's free. But we want to know who's coming so we can kind of account for how much money we need to spend. So we're really excited about that. Great to see you. Josh, anything else you wanted to say in closing before we sign off?
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for 108. Thanks for the August date. That gives some excitement going into the new year.
There you go. There you go. Well, thank you, Josh, so much, you and your team at USI. And thanks for sponsoring this month of Building Program Success. It's really the perfect theme for what it is that you guys do on a daily basis for the industry. So everybody out there, thank you so much for joining in. We are out here.